The gates of Arbory were shut against her, and the footman who came down the avenue to say so was a man Cordelia had never seen in her life. "Her Grace is not receiving," he said, through the ironwork, in the tone of a servant reciting something he had been made to learn. "Not today, and not this week. You may leave a card at the lodge." Cordelia Fitzarland sat perfectly still in the travelling chaise. She had come 400 miles from Naples in 19 days, with her husband's coffin sent ahead by sea, and her own black crape gone rusty at the seams. And she was aware, with a clarity that surprised her, that she was not going to weep and was not going to shout, and that both of those facts were about to be extremely inconvenient for somebody. "What is your name?" she asked. "Kelso, ma'am." "Kelso, look at the panel of this carriage." She waited while he did. "That is the Arbory crest with a lozenge cut into it, which is the mark of a widow, and I am the only widow that crest belongs to. Now open the gate, or go up to the house and tell whoever taught you that sentence that the Duchess of Arbory is standing in her own road in the rain. And let her come down and tell me herself that I am not receiving." She did not raise her voice once. It was worse than if she had. Above her on the roof of the chaise, strapped under oiled canvas with her trunks, sat two things she had not let out of her sight since Naples. A lemon tree in a wooden tub, 4 feet high, its leaves gone leathery with cold, dug out of the terrace garden where her husband had spent the last afternoon he was able to sit up, and a locked deal box containing every letter, ledger, and estate letter book Henry Fitzarland had kept since the year 1804. She had packed them herself. She had watched them loaded at Naples, at Marseille, at Dover, and at every change of horses since. And the postboys had all decided she was mad, and she had let them. The gate opened. She had known it would. What she found at the top of the avenue was her own drawing room with a fire lit in it, and a woman she had last seen in a print shop caricature in 1808, sitting in her chair, wearing black, pouring tea from her pot, with a boy of about 9 years old reading by the window. "Cordelia," said the woman, with enormous warmth. "My dear, we had no notion when to expect you." The narrator sets down what Cordelia thought at that moment, because she never afterward denied it. She thought, quite calmly, that the room smelled wrong. Somebody had been burning cedar in a house that had burned applewood for 200 years. "Mrs. Marchmont," she said, "you are sitting in my chair. I am sitting in my husband's chair." Sybil Marchmont set down the pot. She was 37 that spring, handsome in the way that has been paid for, and she did not blink at all. "I am so very sorry that you have had to hear it like this, after such a journey. Henry and I were married at Gretna on the 3rd of May, 1806. There is a certificate. Mr. Follett has seen it, and the trustees have seen it, and the bishop's man has seen it." She glanced toward the window seat. "That is Hugh. He was born in 1808. He is the 9th Duke of Arbory, and I am afraid, my dear, that you have never been anybody's wife at all." The boy did not look up from his book. He had gone very white and very still, in the way of a child who has learned that the safest thing to do while adults are talking is to become furniture, and Cordelia, who had married at 22 and buried 2 children before either of them drew breath, and had spent 6 years in that house without ever once being able to fill the nursery, looked at him for a long moment and felt something turn over in her chest that had nothing whatever to do with Sybil Marchmont. Then she looked back at Sybil. "How long have you been in this house?" "Since the 29th of March. 5 weeks. Cordelia drew off her gloves, finger by finger, and laid them on the table. "Then you have had 5 weeks to be certain, and I have had 4 minutes, and I find I am already more certain than you are. Ring the bell, please. I should like to know how many of my people you have turned off. They were not, ring it. Sybil Marchmont rang the bell, and did not appear to notice that she had done it, and afterward Cordelia thought that was the moment she knew she was going to win. Not that day, and not that year, but eventually. 9 servants had been dismissed. The housekeeper, Peggy Nunn, who had been Henry's nurse and had been in that house since 1774, had been put out in the 2nd week with a fortnight's wages and no character. Cordelia went to the dower house that night because she would not sleep under a roof she was being permitted to sleep under, and she took the lemon tree with her. And she set it in the south window of a cold room with holland covers still on the furniture, and she sat down in front of it in her travelling cloak and did not light a candle for a long while. The new Duke of Arbory arrived 11 days later, and had been the Duke for nearly 3 months without knowing it. Nathaniel Fitzalan was 38, the son of Henry's father's younger brother, and he had spent 9 years with the commissariat in the peninsula, and 2 more in Lisbon settling other men's accounts, which is not the sort of war anybody writes songs about, but is the sort that teaches a man exactly how a ledger lies. He came into the great hall of Arbory with the dust of the Bath Road on him, and found a woman he had met twice at his cousin's wedding standing in the middle of it, directing 4 men in the removal of a portrait. "Your Grace," Cordelia said, without turning. The Vandyck is not entailed. It was bought by the 6th Duke out of his own funds in 1791, and left to Henry absolutely, and by Henry to me. And it is going to the dower house before Mrs. Marchmont discovers what it is worth. You may object if you like, but you will have to do it while walking, because I am not stopping." Nathaniel looked at the 4 men, and at the empty hook, and at the widow of the man whose title he had inherited. "I have no objection at all," he said. "Might I carry an end?" It was not a promising beginning for a love story, and neither of them mistook it for one. But he watched her, over the following fortnight, with the particular attention of a man who has spent 11 years auditing other people's arithmetic, and what he noticed was this. When the trustees came, and Mr. Follett read the Gretna certificate aloud in the muniment room in his flat lawyer's voice, and came to the words that said Henry Augustus Fitzalan, bachelor, Cordelia Fitzalan laid her right hand flat on the table and spread the fingers wide, deliberately, the way a person does who is holding an entire building up from the inside, and her face did not change at all, and nobody else in that room saw it happen. He thought about that hand for 3 days. He could not have told anybody why. The trustees suspended her jointure on the 8th of May. They were not cruel men. They were frightened men, which is worse and more common. £3,000 a year was charged upon the Somerset lands under a settlement made in 1811, and if the marriage of 1811 was void then, every payment made since was money paid out of another man's estate, and no trustee alive was going to hand over £3,000, while a Scottish certificate sat in a lawyer's strongbox in Lincoln's Inn. They would hold the fund. Chancery would decide. Chancery, as everyone in that room understood and nobody said, would decide in about 9 years. Cordelia walked out of the muniment room into the yew walk and stood there in the rain with her hands folded. Nathaniel found her there. "You will want a house in Bath," he said, "or Tunbridge, somewhere quiet where the talk cannot reach, and I will make you an allowance out of the rents until the lawyers have finished, and I will hear no argument about it, because it is the only decent thing available to me. Cordelia, you cannot fight this. Not from here, not with the whole county watching you do it." "You are very kind," she said, "and you have just told me to leave my house, live on your money, and be quiet, and you believe you have offered me a rescue. Have I understood you? I have offered you peace. You have offered me the same thing she has offered me, in a nicer voice. She turned to face him, and the rain was in her eyes, and she did not blink it away. In 11 days you have not once asked me what I know. You have asked me what I need. Everyone has asked me what I need. I buried my husband on the 4th of March in a foreign country with a hired priest and 11 strangers because I would not let him go into the ground without somebody there who had loved him, and then I came home, and I have not been asked a single question since. So ask me one, Your Grace, or go inside out of the rain. Nathaniel Fitzalan stood there and let himself be looked at. You have not wept, he said slowly. Not once, in front of anybody, in 11 days. And I do not think it is because you did not love him. I think you did all of it on the road from Naples, alone in a carriage, for 19 days, and used up every last part of it before you came through those gates, because you knew you would need to arrive dry. Cordelia's mouth opened slightly. It was the first true thing anybody had said to her since the 14th of February, and it landed like a small clean wound, and after that neither of them was ever able to pretend they had not seen the other. Very good, she said, when she could. Then here is the question you have not asked. Ask me whether I believe the certificate. Do you? I believe the marriage is a lie. She said it evenly, and I believe the boy is not. That was the 11th of May, and it is the point at which this story stopped being about a fraud and became about something considerably harder. She told him in the muniment room, with the door open, because she had learned in 5 weeks what an open door was worth. Hugh Marchmont was Henry's son. He had always been Henry's son. Henry had told her so himself in the 2nd year of their marriage, in that same room, standing exactly where Nathaniel was standing now, and he had wept doing it, and Cordelia, 23 years old, 4 months out of her first confinement, with an empty nursery over her head, had listened to the whole of it, and then asked her husband one question, whether the child was provided for. He was not. Particularly, Sybil Marchmont had spent what she was given. So the Duchess of Arbory had begun, in the spring of 1812, to pay for the schooling of her husband's natural son out of her own pin money, £400 a year, through a Bristol attorney under a false name, for 6 years, and had never told Henry she was doing it, and had never told anybody else at all. He is at Winchester, she said. Or he was, until March, when his mother took him out of it to bring him here and dress him in black and sit him in my window seat. He reads Latin better than I do. He does not know who pays his bills, and he does not know that I know who he is, and if you tell me now that I ought to have hated that child, Your Grace, I will tell you that I tried for about a fortnight in 1812 and could not manage it, because he was 4 years old and he had Henry's exact frown, and none of this was ever his doing. Nathaniel sat down slowly on the muniment chest. You have been paying, he said, for the boy who is being used to strip you of everything you own. Yes, does she know it is you? No, if she knew, she would have used it a month ago. A duchess secretly paying a bastard's school fees looks precisely like hush money. And hush money looks precisely like a guilty conscience. And a guilty conscience looks precisely like a woman who knew all along that she was not lawfully married. Cordelia straightened a paper on the table that did not need straightening, so you see the difficulty. The single kindest thing I have ever done in my life is also the rope she will hang me with, and she has not found it yet, and she will. The rain went on outside the muniment room window for a while. I am sorry, Nathaniel said, for all of it, for the trustees, for arriving late, for inheriting. Stop apologising. Cordelia turned round. You are not the one who wronged me. Not one part of this is your doing, and I have no use at all for a man standing in my husband's house telling me he is sorry. Tell me what you intend to do." He looked at her for a moment. Then he laughed, once, short, entirely without amusement, the sound of a man being handed something he had not expected. "I intend," he said, "to write to Winchester." They went at it together after that, through the wet end of that spring and into a hot, dead summer, and if anybody in the county had been watching closely, they would have seen that the widow at the Dower House and the new Duke were building two entirely separate cases and comparing them once a week like men marking a chart. His was the peerage claim. A petition would go to the Crown and be referred to the Attorney General and end before the Committee for Privileges of the House of Lords, and Nathaniel began collecting what a committee of peers would want, Henry's whereabouts in 1806. The Gretna Register. The two Scottish witnesses named on the certificate, both of whom turned out to be dead. Which was convenient for somebody. Hers was the paper. Every night in the Dower House, by 2 candles, Cordelia Fitzalan read her way through the deal box she had carried from Naples, 9 estate letter books, 4 bundles of private correspondence, a dozen bank books, in order from 1804 forward, and made notes, and drank tea gone cold, and did it again the next night. She was not looking for anything in particular. That is the part she could never make anyone understand afterward. She was reading her husband's life in his own hand, because he was dead, and it was the only way left to hear him, and the fact that it turned out to be the thing that saved her was an accident of grief. They fell into a habit that summer of the last hour of the day. He would ride down to the Dower House after the estate business was finished, and she would come out to the orangery where the lemon tree had been carried in June, and they would walk the length of it and back twice and say almost nothing. "It is not doing well," he said in July. "It is doing exactly as well as a Neapolitan tree can be expected to do in Gloucestershire." She touched a leaf. "Henry asked me for a lemon on the 9th of February. He could not eat anything else by then. There was one tree on that terrace with fruit on it, and I picked it myself. And he held it and did not eat it, and he said," she stopped, and then went on, because she had decided some months ago that she was going to be able to say these things out loud eventually, and there was no use putting it off. He said, "I have had the whole of a life, Cordelia, and this is the part I would keep," which was a lie, and a very kind one, and I have not decided yet whether I forgive him for it. Nathaniel did not say anything for a while. "I have been trying since May," he said, "to work out what to call what I feel in this orangery, and I have got as far as knowing it is not pity." "No," Cordelia said. "It is not." The light was going. The orangery was full of that green underwater dimness such places get at 9 in the evening, and neither of them had moved for some seconds, and the distance between them was about 2 feet and had been getting shorter all summer by degrees neither of them had consented to. "I am in mourning until the 4th of March, she said, quietly. "I am also a woman whose marriage is being disputed in Chancery, and whose entire case rests on being able to stand up in front of a committee of peers and be believed. If I am anything to you before that is finished, anything at all, in a garden, at 9 o'clock, where a gardener's boy might see, then everything she has said about me becomes true. Not in law. In every drawing-room in England, which is worse and faster. I know it. Then say it plainly, and then go home." He said it plainly. He said, "I would rather have you at a distance of 2 feet for the rest of my life than have anything else near at hand." And then he went home, and the 2 feet stayed exactly 2 feet, and Cordelia Fitzalan stood in the orangery with her hand on the tub of a half-dead lemon tree for a good while after the sound of his horse had gone. Michaelmas brought the audit, and the audit brought the county, and Cordelia did the thing that made her enemy of half of Gloucestershire. There were 40 people in the great hall of Arbory on the 29th of September, tenants, the trustees, Missa, Follett the bishop's man, Sibylle Marchmont in grey silk with the boy beside her, and Cordelia Fitzalan, who had not been invited and did not require to be, walked in at 11 o'clock with a paper in her hand and asked Mr. Follett to read it aloud. It was a deed of settlement, executed and witnessed 9 days earlier, by which the Dowager Duchess of Arbory settled the sum of £12,000 in the 4% upon Hugh Marchmont, natural son of the late Henry Augustus Fitzalan, 7th Duke of Arbory, absolutely, upon his attaining the age of 21, and appointed trustees, and provided for his continued education at Winchester College, where, the deed noted, in a clause Mr. Follett read out in exactly the same voice as all the others, his fees had been paid quarterly since the Lady Day of 1812 by one C. Fitzalan of Arbory. The noise that went through that hall is difficult to describe. It was not a gasp. It was 40 people, all deciding something different at the same moment. Sibylle Marchmont was on her feet. This is a settlement, madam, and it is irrevocable, and it was executed on the 20th of September before 2 witnesses, and there is not one thing you or I or the Court of Chancery can do about it now. Cordelia had not looked at her. She was looking at the boy. Hugh, stand up, please. He stood up. 9 years old, in black, with his father's frown. Everyone in this room has spent 5 months discussing whether you are a duke, she said. You are not. I am sorry. You are the natural son of a man I loved, and your mother has told you a story that will not survive a committee of the House of Lords, and when it fails, and it will fail, she will have nothing. And you would have had nothing with her, and that is why I have done this today and not in 6 months when it might have looked like charity. She held out the paper. It is not charity. It is what your father should have done in 1808 and did not, because he was ashamed, and shame is a poor reason to leave a child unprovided for. You will have £12,000 and your schooling. Nobody can take it from you, not her, not me. Take the paper. He took it. And then, because he was 9, and because nobody had spoken to him honestly since March, he said, in front of 40 people, "Are you the lady from Bristol?" "Yes," said Cordelia Fitzalan. "I am the lady from Bristol. The narrator will not gild what that cost her." By the following Thursday, it was in every parlour between Gloucester and Bath that the Duchess of Arbory had been secretly paying money to her husband's mistress's child for 6 years. And there is a version of that fact which is a kindness, and a version which is a bribe, and Sibylle Marchmont, who was clever and now had nothing left to lose, spent October and November making certain that the second version travelled faster. Her second move came in December, and it very nearly worked. She swore an affidavit and had it copied, and saw it into the right hands that the Dowager Duchess of Arbory and the present Duke had been in company alone at the Dower House and in the Orangery at Arbory on some 40 occasions since May, that the payments to the boy were hush money to keep a bastard quiet, and that the 2 of them had contrived the whole defence between them for their own advantage, being, as she put it, in the flat legal phrasing that makes such things unanswerable, long attached. 2 of the 4 trustees withdrew from the defence within a fortnight. The bishop's man stopped calling, and Nathaniel Fitzalan was summoned to London to attend the Attorney-General in January, and had to go alone, because for him to travel with her now would confirm every word of it. He came to the Dower House on the 9th of January to say so. I could refuse to go. You could not, and you will not, and if you did, I should think less of you. Cordelia stood by the window with her arms folded. Go to London. Say nothing about me that you would not say about a stranger. If they ask you whether there is an attachment, tell them the truth, which is that there is not yet, not in any form that has a name, and let it be believed. Cordelia, go, he went. And in the 3rd week of January there was a hard frost, and Sybil Marchmont, who was still in possession of the great house, and would be until the Lords said otherwise, gave an order that the orangery stoves were to be let out to save coal, and a Neapolitan lemon tree in a wooden tub stood one night at 4 degrees of frost, with nobody to speak for it. It was Peggy Nunn who came for Cordelia, at 6 in the morning, walking 2 miles from the village on a bad hip. They got it into the Dower House kitchen between them, the old woman and the Duchess, and stripped the dead leaves off it by candlelight, and there was not a great deal to be done, and both of them knew it. Cordelia sat down on the kitchen flags in her nightgown, and her cloak with her hands black from the soil, and for the first time since the 14th of February, 11 months. 400 miles, 1 husband, 1 house, 1 reputation, she put her head down and wept until she could not breathe, in front of 1 old servant on a stone floor at 6 in the morning, with nobody in England left standing beside her. Peggy Nunn sat down on the flags too, which took her some time, and held on to her, and it was Peggy Nunn, at about 7 o'clock, wiping her own face with the heel of her hand, who said the thing that finished it. 3rd of May, 1806, she said. That's the date on that paper of hers, ain't it? I've heard it said 40 times. She sniffed. He never signed his name that year, my lamb. Not from Lady Day till the harvest. He come off that grey mare at the Ledbury Gate in March, and put his right hand through the top bar, and broke every bone in it, and Mr. Pritchard set it, and he had it in a splint to his elbow till August, and he couldn't hold a pen, nor a fork, nor a razor. I shaved him myself, Sundays. He were 32, and he cried about it. Cordelia Fitzalan sat on the floor of the kitchen with her hands full of dead lemon leaves, and understood all at once that she had read the proof of it 9 separate times between May and Christmas, and had not once seen it, because she had been looking for a lie, and it had been sitting there the whole while as a series of perfectly ordinary letters written in a clerk's hand and signed with A. Mark. She was in the muniment room by 9. She had it by noon, the estate letter book for 1806, every entry from the 25th of March to the 11th of August in the hand of the steward, each one endorsed H.F., his mark, with the steward's attestation beside it, 21 weeks of a duke who could not write his own name, and folded into the back of the book where it had been since it was paid, Mr. Pritchard the surgeon's bill for the setting and dressing of a compound fracture of the right hand, dated the 28th of March, 1806. The certificate from Gretna bore a full flowing signature, correctly spelled, in a good copper plate. The hearing before the Committee for Privileges was in the 2nd week of March, and it went, in the end, very quickly. Nathaniel had the room, and the peers, and the Attorney-General's men. Cordelia had a letter book, a surgeon's bill, and a 78-year-old woman in her Sunday black, who had come up to London on the mail coach, and had never in her life been further than Gloucester. The forger had been good. He had traced the hand from a genuine letter of 1804, and he had got it very nearly right, and that was the whole of the trouble with it, because on the 3rd of May 1806, Henry Augustus Fitzalan could not have made that signature with a pistol at his head. Sybil Marchmont sat in that room and watched 21 weeks of steward's entries read out one after another, and she did not move, and at the end of it she stood up and said the only honest sentence Cordelia ever heard her speak, which was, "He told me he would provide for the boy." "He did not," Cordelia said. "So I did. In 1812. 5 years before you thought of it, madam, and without a forgery." There was a sound in that committee room that its clerk noted afterward he had not heard in 19 years of service. The claim was dismissed on the 14th of March. Sybil Marchmont was prosecuted for the forgery in the summer of 1818, convicted on the evidence of a Bristol engraver who had been paid in a bill she was foolish enough to endorse, and transported for 14 years. The boy did not go with her. There was no version of the law in which he could have, and there was, by then, a settlement of £12,000 standing in his name that his mother had never been able to touch. Nathaniel found Cordelia on the steps outside afterward, in the March wind, with her mourning ended 9 days before, and nobody at all left to be careful in front of. "It is done," he said. "It is done. Then I am going to say the whole of it now, because I have been at a distance of 2 feet since June, and I am nearly 40, and I find I have no patience left at all." He took off his hat. "I did not fall in love with you when you were gentle, because you never once were. I fell in love with you in a muniment room when you told me to stop apologising. I have watched you spend a year being the only person in England who behaved decently to a child who was being used as a weapon against you, and I have nothing to offer that you have not already got, and I am asking anyway. Marry me, not for the house. You have your own house. Marry me, because I would like to be at a distance of no feet at all for the rest of my life." Cordelia Fitzalan, who had buried her husband and had not buried her title, and who had been asked what she needed by a great many people, and asked what she wanted by nobody, put her hand flat against his chest and spread her fingers wide, the way a person does who is holding an entire building up from the inside, and then she took hold of his coat and kissed him on the steps of the House of Lords in front of God, the Attorney General, and 2 clerks. They were married in the autumn of 1818, quietly, in the parish church at Arbory, with Peggy Nunn reinstated as housekeeper at a wage that scandalised the county, and Hugh Marchmont standing up at the front in a new coat because Cordelia had asked him to, and he had said yes, without needing to think about it. On a morning in April of 1820, she was in the orangery at 8 o'clock in a gardening apron with her sleeves turned back, and Nathaniel came in with their daughter on his hip, 11 months old, furious about something, and possessed of her father's absolute conviction that any problem could be solved by ledger, and found his wife standing quite still in front of the lemon tree. It had come back the slow way over 2 years out of the roots. It had been an ugly stick for the whole of 1818. And that morning there were 9 lemons on it, small and hard and green as bottle glass, the first fruit it had set since a terrace in Naples. "Well," Nathaniel said. "Yes," said Cordelia. She picked one, which was probably a fortnight early, and stood turning it over in her fingers in the green light. A woman of 31 who had been told at a gate in the rain that she was not receiving, and she thought, without any bitterness left in it at all, that Henry had been right about one thing after all. This was the part she would keep. Hugh came out from the house at 8:30, home from Winchester for the Easter holidays, and already very nearly as tall as she was, to say that the post had come, and that there was a letter from his tutor, and could he please have the gig. She gave him the lemon instead. He put it in his pocket, which is what boys do, and said thank you, and went off up the path, and that is how the household at Arbory came to have the habit. Kept up for 40 years afterward, and never once explained to visitors, of a green lemon left on the breakfast table on the 14th of February every year without anybody saying a word about it.